What does college football 2024 mean to you? Are there things you're looking forward to? Because I have some things. The first thing is this whole idea of conference realignment. You know, and I know it happened. Like, you know, the University of Washington is playing in the Big Ten this year. The University of Texas and Oklahoma, they're playing in the SEC this year. But we haven't seen it. You know the Pac-12's not there anymore. But you have not gotten to that 10 o'clock window on the East Coast and tried to find Pac-12 games and then realized, oh, it's not there anymore, at least as we came to know it. Oh, I forgot about that. Like, all that's coming this year. One of the things that I'm just morbidly fascinated and curious about is what is the reality of realignment. That could be a late kick tour name. Reality of Realignment Tour. It's too hard to say. Never mind. Scrap that. Coach Quinn, Gelby, if you're listening, scratch that one off the list. We got to come up with names for this stuff. I am henceforth referring to this as the A2 and B2 era. So I got the A2 being the SEC and the Big Ten. There will be a clear distinction between the strengths of those conferences and what I'm calling the B2, which is the ACC and the Big 12. Still very quality football being played and pretty high-level football being played there, but the strength of those conferences, it'll be very obvious there's a pretty sizable gulf there. But how is it interpreted come playoff time? More on that in a second. Also, it's going to take some getting used to think about Utah as a Big 12 team or Stanford as an ACC team. You realize you could throw a rock from Stanford's campus and have it land in the Pacific Ocean, and they are playing conference games against Virginia Tech or Virginia or Miami. That's where we are now on that front. Oh, by the way, so is Cal. And oh, by the way, so is SMU. They are ACC teams. And I just think there's so many headlines that are sprayed like a fire hose in your face as a college football fan right now that a lot of you just flat out forgot that. Because it's been, a couple of months now since those headlines came down. So that's the first thing, just the reality of conference realignment. The second thing is this whole conversation we had last week, I think, about the face of college football. So it used to be, up until very recently, that when there was trouble in the sport, everyone looked down in Tuscaloosa and, oh, Nick Saban's got a press conference today, or, oh, Nick Saban's at SEC Media Days, or Nick Saban's taking the podium before a playoff game. Let's ask him about existential issues facing our sport. Maybe work some Bama depth chart stuff in on the back end. And he always had something to say. We had him on this show a number of times. He always had something well thought out to say. Well, I don't know how vocal Nick Saban will be moving forward, but he's not an active head coach anymore. But yet the sport has never needed powerful voices speaking up for change more so than we do now. Because what's happening now, I don't really think works for anyone. And a lot of those guys feel the same way. We've heard Kirby talk about it. We've heard Jim Harbaugh talk about it. Marcus Freeman's talked about it. We've heard a number of these guys talk about it. It's just, you're going to have to turn the volume up a little bit. And it needs to sound like a chorus. It doesn't need to sound like 10 different people trying to sing 10 different songs, because that gets you nowhere. There's some disagreement about certain odds and ends, but at the core, a lot of these guys want the same things. A lot of us want the same things. In some cases, we want some things back that we feel are lacking from the game right now. So you need powerful voices speaking up. Very interested to see who that'll be, like who takes on that responsibility. Because, guys, it's hard enough to run a football program. It's really difficult to do that. So, candidly, a lot of those guys would listen to me say that and say, well, piss off, find someone else to do it. I got a job to do. I know you do. Trust me, I get it as much as someone who doesn't coach can get it. But that doesn't negate the fact that what I'm talking about is needed. So if you're not going to take on the responsibility, you know who is. And who is people who don't have much of a clue as to what they're talking about, and their stances and their statements and their ideas are going to fill a vacuum that could have been filled by you, and you're going to end up having to live a lifestyle as a coach that is in some cases shaped by them. And if you don't believe me, check out your life right now. Check out what December's like for you right now. Might I suggest if the right people had spoken up and taken action 5, 6, 7 years ago, you may not be in the mess you're in right now. So I'll leave that there. Thirdly, do we see any more unexpected churn? There are a lot of differing opinions as to what made Nick Saban decide to retire when he did. You know, I've told you several times that I think we're approaching an era, if nothing changes, we're approaching an era where I don't think Saban's the last one, and I think much younger coaches, you could see out of the blue, just decide I'm going to step away from the game. I'm not mentioning any by name. I am telling you in confidence, I don't even know how many. The count would not be able to fit on both of these hands if I were to try and count them with my fingers, of guys who have privately said, I'm just about out of here. I'm just about done. I cannot take this. I'm not talking about low-end grad assistants or like off-field analysts or anything. I'm talking about coordinators, head coaches at major programs. Some of them, you would think, no way, that guy's got another 20 years left. Well, he should. Yes, he should. But there are guys looking at NFL. Now, I'm going to float you a radical concept here. Dan Mullen has been noticed by a lot of people. Dan Mullen has it made right now. Dan Mullen, now he didn't want to get fired. But once Mullen was let go by Florida, he did it the right way. He found his way into the media lane, and he hasn't mailed it in. He's done a really good job. Dan Mullen's really informative and entertaining. And as a result, Dan Mullen's stock has only risen since he has been let go from Florida. And he's been on your TV screens, and every coach sounds like a genius on TV. You're always right, too. You're never wrong. And so you get to sit in a studio on Saturdays, and you get to elevate your profile, and you're constantly in front of everyone's face. And then, lo and behold, Dan Mullen starts getting offers again. And he's turned several of them down, and he can afford to continue to do it. Or he could just wait for the right one to come along. And there are other guys who have noticed that. And I've had a bunch of coaches mention Dan Mullen, and they will say it like this: I may just go do what Mullen does for a little while. They're not talking about getting fired. They're talking about voluntarily stepping down. Here's the thinking. Let's picture myself as a major coach, head coach at Pate State right now. We're a perennial top 20 team, but I detest the current state of the sport. I'm 44, 45 years old. I still got a lot of tread left on my tires, but I just want a break. So I step down for whatever reason. And I go to CBS, or I go to Fox, or NBC, or ESPN, and I go sit in the studio 3 or 4 years. I go sit there long enough for the sport to figure itself out, and I basically, once I like things the way that I want them, once I got things the way I want them, I just hop right back in. Let my agent know, start floating my name, and once the right job opens up, I'll just hop right back in. I think someone's going to do that. I think someone in the prime of their career may step away from college football and look a lot like Chris Peterson looks, actually. I don't think Coach Peterson plans on getting back in, but I'm saying Chris Peterson, when he stepped down, took a lot of people by surprise. You may see someone else or someone else's step down, go work TV for a little while, refresh themselves in the process, recharge their batteries, and then when the sport looks, more inviting, something they actually recognize, they hop back in. There will be, I think, a collective realization in 2024 about what the playoff is. There's a 12-team playoff coming. That's all most people know. But the collective realization of how that playoff works, I think around August, September, October, that'll start to set in for a lot of people. And some people are not going to be happy with it. I don't even mean the size of the field. I mean how the field is selected. Like, trust me, you guys watch the show. Like, if you're watching the show in January, you're a hardcore fan, so you probably are aware that as of the moment, we have a 6-and-6 format, which means 6 auto bids for conference champs. It's insane. And then you got 6 at-large spots. And there's a lot of talk behind the scenes that may shift down to a 5 auto bid, 7 at-large model. But either way, that means, your SEC and Big Ten champ are going to be in, and then you got 3 or 4 more conference champs that are guaranteed a spot. As of now, you probably have 2 G5 teams in there, whatever G5 means to you these days. And mind you, it's not just your top 12 teams. You've got the highest ranked conference champs regardless. There's a world where you could be ranked 20th. Liberty could be ranked 20th, or actually, let me pick teams in conferences. So, Tulane. It always sounds like I'm picking on them. I'm not. Hats off to Coach Summerall. Get it done down there. But there's a world where a Tulane or a UTSA or whomsoever could be 20th in the country. But because they're one of the 2 highest ranked G5 champs, they just get in. They get in over a 10-2 or 9-3 Oregon that's floating right there on that bubble. Insanity. I don't think it'll last that way, but it's insanity. So how does the committee interpret strength of conference is what I am totally out to lunch on. I don't know. And what I mean is you've got a new era here, and you got the A2, B2 era. You got 2 behemoth conferences. in the SEC and the Big Ten. Then you got the Big 12 and the ACC, which are respectable in their conference strengths, but they pale in comparison to the big boys. What's it going to take? Is it a 2-game gap? Is it 9-3 in the SEC equals 11-1 in the Big 12? How is it interpreted? Because keep in mind, they still got to negotiate that new playoff, 2026 and beyond. And if Greg Sankey or Tony Petiti sit there and they see that the strength of their conferences is not getting properly interpreted by that committee, I don't think they're going to sign off on any kind of auto bid structure in the future. And in the world as it's structured now, why should they? I also think when we do get to December, now this is going to blow your mind because again, although everyone knows we've got an expanded playoff, we haven't lived it yet. I'm not even talking about whether I like it or not. It's here, so think about this. December is going to feel like the biggest time warp you have ever thrust yourself into, and January too. There will be a month-long period where you have no clue what day it is. So think about this. We're trying to find out if they have the early signing day still set for that third Wednesday in December. We're trying to find that out. So let's just, for the sake of argument, assume that it is. Remember, we got 4 rounds of playoffs now. So you got the early signing day that I assume is on that Wednesday, which would be December 18th. The first round of the playoffs starts 2 days later. You could have teams out there prepping for playoffs, and the week of the game, they're also tasked with signing their class. Makes total sense. So you sign a class. 2 days later, you may have a road playoff game. They got a game on Friday, then there are 3 of them on that Saturday, okay? That's the first round. Then you have Christmas, and then the next week, Tuesday, December 31st, you have a quarterfinal game. Wednesday, January 1st, you got quarterfinals. And then you fast forward another 10 days, and by the way, stop me when you see a Saturday anywhere here. The semifinals happen on Thursday, January 9th, and Friday, January 10th. Then you fast forward another 10 days, and the national championship game is on a Monday night. Oh, by the way, that's Martin Luther King Day. Oh, by the way, that's Inauguration Day. How do you feel about that? I think it's insanity. How do you feel about that? And just pinpoint any day in that stretch. If you're like me, if you're glued to this stuff, and you've got portal happening within that, and you've got coaching searches happening within that, you will not know what day it is. You will feel like you have been transported to another dimension for an entire month. There's no other way to be a college football fan anymore in that structure. There's no other way to do it. So, by the way, I skimmed this over a little bit too quickly. Our playoff games are going to be Friday and Saturday, then Tuesday and Wednesday, then Thursday and Friday, then Monday. You really think the right people have their hands on the wheel of this sport right now?